Arcadian Vanguard presents The Wrestling News in your daily wrestling newscast for Thursday, October 5th, 2023. Good morning, I'm Mike Sempervive. We begin today with last night's 4th anniversary episode of AEW Dynamite broadcast live on TBS from the Stockton Arena in Stockton, California. The show concluded with Adam Copeland, formerly known as Edge, being officially welcomed to AEW and giving a promo in which he explained his decision to switch companies and tried to reform his celebrated tag team with Christian Cage, but was rebuffed by Cage.
So I am out here hat in hand, and I am asking you, let's do it. Let's end our careers together as a team. Let's show them all what we can do. Go.
Cage then introduced Luchasaurus, who is scheduled to face Copeland in Copeland's first AEW match on next week's Dynamite. AEW World Champion MJF was attacked by Jay White during an earlier in-ring promo segment in which Bullet Club Gold called MJF out, and the champion claimed to have nothing to do with the attack on White that took place at the end of last week's episode. The segment ended with White leaving the ring with MJF's AEW World title belt. The opening match of the night saw Rey Fenix make his second successful defense of the international title with a win over Nick Jackson of the Young Bucks. Later in the show, the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn also retained the World Trios title against the Butcher, the Blade, and Kip Sabian. Also on the show, Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega were attacked by Powerhouse Hobbs, who was revealed to be in league with Don Callis.
Oh my God. Chris Jericho trying to put his body between Kenny Omega and Will Hobbs in that steel chair. And power! Oh, got the edge of the chair across the skull of Chris Jericho.
Jericho put himself right in front of Kenny Omega, right in front, took the chair shots.
Jericho tried to take the bullet. Oh, and Hobbs now just punishing the body of Kenny Omega.
What a shocker. Powerhouse Hobbs in league. Very, very apparent with Don Callis.
The attack came after Jericho and Omega's victory against Callis' team of Konosuke Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher. In other results, Tony Storm beat Sky Blue, and a returning Wardlow scored a quick win over Griff Garrison in his first match since losing the TNT Championship to Luchasaurus last June on the first episode of Collision. In ratings news, last Tuesday's episode of NXT on USA Network drew a total audience of 857,000, according to WrestleNomics. That's an increase of nearly 35% from last week's audience of 636,000. The rating in the key 18 to 49-year-old demographic was .22, up nearly 25% from last week's key demo rating of .18. Last Tuesday's episode featured Dominic Mysterio regaining the North American title from Trick Williams, plus major announcements regarding John Cena, Cody Rhodes, and Paul Heyman. And in an update on the death of Russ Francis, the plane crash in which Francis and one other person died at Lake Placid Airport in the Adirondacks last Sunday was caused by a loss of power to the engine of the 1976 Cessna 177 they were flying, according to a report from ESPN. The plane, piloted by the 70-year-old Francis and 63-year-old Richard McSpadden, crashed into a ravine near a runway while trying to land after running into engine trouble. The report was supported by multiple witnesses who stated the pilots had reported their situation over the radio just prior to the accident. An investigative team is working through the rest of the week to gather information on the accident, according to National Transportation Safety Board investigator Todd Gunther. And before we leave you today, we'd like to remind you that however you consume your content, you can find the wrestling news 24 hours a day and 7 days a week across social media. On Twitter, follow us at Wrestling News AV. Our Facebook page is also Wrestling News AV. The Wrestling News can also be found on the Arcadian Vanguard YouTube page. And for those who utilize Amazon Echo devices, just tell Alexa to play the Wrestling News podcast. And remember to make sure you add podcast at the end. Once again, for daily updates, breaking news, and more, follow the Wrestling News across social media. And that's the news for today. If anything happens, we will be here to tell you about it. No clickbait, no paywall, just the wrestling news. The The Wrestling News is a division of Arcadian Vanguard, and the Wrestling Newscast is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network.